I'm very pleased to be here this morning, and I will be talking about the design of MOOCs for language learning. I was reflecting on that this morning because John and I have a common background in mobile learning rather than anything to do with MOOCs. Inevitably, quite a lot of what I'll say will actually relate to the use of mobiles. However, in recent months, I've been involved in the design and development of learning materials for a MOOC on FutureLearn. So I thought it would be interesting to reflect on some of that experience and try to merge it with mobile learning and come to some perhaps enhanced understanding of how MOOCs and mobiles can be used together in this within this challenge of trying to teach languages through technology. So I hope that's some kind of rationale for you. And actually, I realize also I'm not going to say so much about language learning. I will be emphasizing more aspects of design, how to design for learners, how to design for effective learning on any kind of, using any kind of technology and human resources. So, oh, I should also say that I come from the Open University, based in Milton Keynes. I'm there in the Institute of Educational Technology. We've been developing online education for several decades now, and mobile learning also for the past 20 years. I lead the Learning Futures program. It's a research and innovation program where we we draw together all our research projects. Many are externally funded, but we also think about how research can inform practice. So we think about how the innovations that are coming through, often through research projects, can then be applied to OU courses or informal learning experiences and platforms that we support. And we have this annual report called Innovating Pedagogy that you may have come across. If not, you can download copies online. And the most recent one came out earlier this year. And I was looking back through those reports and remembering that in the first of the reports, in 2012, we mentioned MOOCs. That was the kind of the buzzword at that time, and it was one of the pedagogies that we highlighted in our report, and we said it was freedom to experiment beyond the constraints of formal education that attracted many of the early adopters. And I thought it would be good for us to kind of revisit that spirit of freedom to experiment, to go beyond the constraints of formal education, and to have that as an aspiration also maybe for today, for the designs that you will develop in the workshop in the afternoon. I think all too often MOOCs can become just some way of replicating existing practice, putting up some materials that already exist, making them available to a wider audience, but not really changing the practice. And yet technology enables us to do that, potentially, of course, within the constraints of our settings and our environments, which often do impose many constraints. So when we talk about MOOCs, we emphasize the fact that they are massive, they're open, they're online, and they are courses. So of course one could say a lot about each of those elements. But again, we've done massive learning for a long time in that many of our Open University courses are made of, our courses where thousands of students are registered. And so our experience, I think, is relevant here. And they're also open entry courses. They've been online for a long time. So I'll make some comments as I go through about how we manage this, because massive courses can be extremely challenging. They need the personal touch, and how do you make that happen? So these, the courses and also the platforms that we have, such as OpenLearn and iSpot and others, enable the broader public to participate in education. And that's really important as well, that the knowledge is created by lots of people, not just, say, academics, and it's shared widely, it's shared globally. It's not just for some students that are registered on our courses. And learners are seen in some of these platforms as knowledge creators. And again, I think that's a major theme for any event where you're going to be thinking about designing for learners. How are they going to participate in the process of knowledge creation, rather than just being recipients of something that others have created? And last but not least, the value that we can put nowadays on informal learning and incorporating that into formal education. We know that people learn informally on YouTube, on social media, through all kinds of open resources that are now available. So what are the implications of that for the formal context? Are we going to ignore what they do outside of class? Or are we going to try and connect with it and incorporate it into the designs, and maybe even be inspired or influenced by what people do in their leisure time, in their everyday lives? So those are some of the, I think, interesting themes to bear in mind for today. One of my colleagues, Francisco Iniesta, also known as Paco, unfortunately couldn't make it today, so I brought his slide with me to highlight the work that we also do in accessibility. And Paco has done some very valuable work, research in looking at how MOOC providers cater for disabled learners, looking at their motivations for taking part in MOOCs, and how the MOOCs can be made accessible for disabled learners. So if you want any advice or up-to-date knowledge in this respect, then Paco is the person to contact. So that's why I've incorporated this slide for you here today. The research that we do on open learning also highlights the ways in which learners themselves are designing their own learning. And they're structuring the learning as well. When we talk about informal learning, it can be very ad hoc, just looking something up on the web, watching a video, learning a little bit. But there's also the potential for learners to actually structure and organize their own learning with others, online in groups and communities and so on. So some of our projects also look at how that's done. And one of my students who just recently completed her doctorate in education, her Ed.D., was looking at how freelance language teachers use Twitter for their professional development. And they're doing this of their own accord because they don't get professional development anywhere else. So they have to organize it for themselves, among themselves. And so she was looking both at the online interactions and the connections that people make, the resources they find, how they share them, and also the sort of the offline interaction as well, how they meet up, and things that they create together as well. So this, I think, again is something that may inspire you to think about how learners might use their current networks online, or create new networks, and perhaps supplement what you offer with additional activity. In language learning, additional practice is always a key concern. How can we get people to practice more? It's something that's extremely important, and I think this is where these informal environments offer a lot of opportunity. So in the rest of this talk, I'm going to say something about my involvement in designing a Future Learn MOOC recently. I'll then say some words about mobile language learning for migrants, drawing on some of our projects, and some remarks about how you might think about combining MOOCs and mobiles for language learning. So the MOOC that I have in mind, that I'm just going to say a little about, is a postgraduate course that we developed and are offering on the Future Learn platform. It's called Technology and Learning Foundations of TEL, so Technology Enhanced Learning. This is a remake of a course that we there was a previous version of it, if you like, and it's been completely redesigned. But it's always been a popular thing to study with us. So this is the course. And it was created within a reasonably short time frame. But I think what's interesting is to reflect on how we went about the design and our kind of thought processes in this. Because we had a lot of previous content which we could have just kind of repackaged. But we always go back to basics. Who are the learners? What do we know about them? Are they any different now to what they were like 5 years ago? What's changing in their environment? What technologies are they using? You know, what are the what's the current climate with regard to people's you know, the pressures that people have in their lives, for instance? How does that impact on their studies? So who are the learners? At the OU, there's a new set of personas that is based on extensive research with learners to identify you know, what their preferences are, what the constraints they live under, and so on. Then, of course, what will they learn when they study with us? But the key question is, what do we want them to do in the course? Not what will they study so much as what will they do? How will they be active? What will they create? What will they find? What will they analyze? So it's all about what we get them to do. What we want them to do might be different what they might actually do, so we also think about what they might actually do, and that involves things like, you know, are they going to skip this part because it's not essential? Are they going to look at the assessment first and work back from that? So we know all the tricks, and we think about how we try and get them to engage them with all parts of the course, or to give them some options. So that, for instance, in this one there are some themes, and they can follow a theme or follow some themes more than others. So there's an element of choice there as well. And how will they be supported? A really fundamental question. How will they be supported? So just to develop that a little bit more, with the active learning aspect, there are lots of activities that get the learners to do something which might involve, for example, some reading first or some research, and then making use of what they've learned. So this is just one of our activities where they have to form an opinion about technology-enhanced learning based on some reading, and then they choose some statements and select their reaction to the statement, and then they can look at what everyone else thought as well and compare their reaction with others. Another activity is where they're asked to look at some definitions of technology-enhanced learning and then formulate their own definition, share that in the forum, and then they also have to comment on another person's definition. So this is what we can see here. So they're always very active. They're always doing something, writing something, choosing something, making some decisions, and sharing and commenting. So the fundamental thing here is the dialogue that the learners are engaged in with the tutors and also with the other students, and the support that they get. So when they sign up for the course, they get information about these opportunities for dialogue and support. So within the modules, there are facilities to make comments and engage in discussions, and different types of conversation. This is, I think, quite interesting. There are what are called the Watercooler Conversations. So these are kind of very light touch conversations. You can come in, have a look at what people are saying, maybe throw in a comment, but there's no expectation that you'll engage in the entire conversation. Then the second type, the Mountain Conversations, where you're building something with others, constructing knowledge by sharing your experiences and perspectives. These are used quite a lot, and the learners are encouraged to like some of the contributions to build a list that can then be filtered. And then there are the capstone conversations, which are tend to come at the end of some sequence of learning activities, and here the learners are encouraged to synthesize what they've learned and reflect on that material. So these are some of the types of conversation. Crucially, there are small study groups. So although it's a massive course, actually this one is not that massive because it has only over 100 students. So in OU terms, it's not massive. But the students are allocated to study groups. And within those smaller study groups, where there might be, say, 20 students, they will have a discussion with the other students and with the tutor who gets to know that group. And there's the online synchronous session, the synchronous sessions as well, the tutorials, online tutorial sessions where things can be discussed. And the students can set up online tutorial or in online sessions for themselves as well, informally. So with the other people in their group. Okay, so that's just a flavour of how that particular MOOC is designed and kind of what's important about it, I think. I'm now going to, in a way, switch direction, and then later I'll try and combine these things to say some words about the way that we've gone about designing mobile learning for migrants and with migrants in some of our projects. I don't have time to go into great detail here, but I wanted to highlight the social learning aspect, which actually wasn't there when we started, but it definitely has emerged over the years as, you know, being what people, many people seek out, that social connection, and that is influencing how we think about the designs. And increasingly also the development is being conceived as being done with the migrants rather than something we create for them. So that's also a change. This was a big project that we had with the European partners. And here the important thing was to develop both some learning materials, so language lessons, but conceived as mobile assistance, so something that would be accessible on the go, and then also an element of social networking. A prototype was developed in this project, which had lots of functionality in different kinds of facilities for learning on the go. But reflecting on that work more and more, we think about what we did then and how we might do things differently, and do things differently in our current projects. And it's really about the limitations of even, being with a group of people and trying to identify their needs and discover how they use their technologies. The answers that people give are constrained, I think, by the expectations that are present in such a forum and the time available. And we found that it was only by having user trials and feedback through those trials that we generated better data about what people actually needed. So within this project there were some mini language lessons covering basics and things like transport, healthcare, and so on. But there were also some interesting things, and there's a lot of still a lot of information about these designs available openly. So things like connecting the learning to the learner's experience of their everyday life. So they might be traveling by train and hearing announcements. So there would be things like ability to hear the announcements in the app. Think about the signs that you see around you, as well as doing things like buying tickets or asking for directions. So trying to make use of the environment as a source of for their learning. There were lots of positive outcomes from this project. There were these mini lessons that were particularly liked, that could be accessed any time, that gave visualizations of progress, and gave people the feeling of being more confident in being able to use the language. Access to trusted information was also very important, and trusted social networks. So with this project, as with many others, there was the idea that the app would be available and anyone could use it and anyone could connect with anyone, but actually it was the trusted social networks that people wanted, in the sense that they wanted to have a real connection with some people that they had either met or could have a good relationship with. But that still left me feeling, what if we still don't know enough about meeting migrants' real needs in terms of language and communication, in spite of the fact that I think some of the designs were really excellent. My own personal reflection is that I think in a project app there are some topics that are maybe less likely to be addressed. And here is a random selection that came to mind. But I feel that that when people are learning a language, it's such a personal experience, and everyone has their own particular areas that they maybe want to be able to discuss or to think about in another language. How do we address these areas? It may not be possible to include them formally. It may be that we point people towards resources that they might access to supplement what we already offer. So I think what I'm doing here is just indicating that apart from what you offer to learners, they may have other needs that will not be directly addressed, but you might suggest ways in which they can find additional support or information. And when I was looking at what the Council of Europe were saying in their toolkit about support for adult refugees in language learning, there's a lot of interesting material there. And I think what's good about it is that they talk about language needs, but also the capabilities of migrants or refugees. And I like the approach that we should find out what they can already do in the target language, rather than starting from a position of, well, they can't do very much, so we need to help them. There are probably some things they can already do. And we were just chatting 10 minutes ago about people's use of technology, and that they might, for instance, have some digital literacies around use of their phone, and things that they recognize already on their phone, the language that they recognize, the language that they're using implicitly by choosing certain options. There may be things that they can already do that you can start to use as a starting point. And also the languages that they know, because again, too often I think we think, oh, well, they don't know this language, but they probably know some other languages. And how can that be used perhaps to support them? Maybe they can support each other if they have another common language. Or they can maybe search for resources using another language. So I think we can also think creatively there about how we take advantage of people's capabilities and see them in that light. And then finally, we come to how we might combine MOOCs with mobile learning. So I don't see these as kind of being separate. On the one hand, you can just access a MOOC on a mobile device, which is fine, but that's kind of missing the point of mobile learning. So what purposes might mobile learning serve in relation to MOOCs? So assuming that people are studying a MOOC, which is a great thing to do. It gives you a lot of structure, it gives you a lot of access to resources, people, communities, and so on. So what can mobile learning offer in addition to that? Well, again, don't really have time to go into too much detail today, but just to get you thinking about the different ways in which mobile technologies are used nowadays. The ways in which they can be used to augment an experience. You're looking at something and your phone gives you some information that's relevant to what you're looking at, broadly speaking. It could be a building, could be a picture, it could be something in your environment. So there's that whole mobile augmentation that we can be thinking about. There's also the whole playful learning aspect. Most people play some sort of game on their phone. So how can that be also incorporated into the learning experience? And then there are the intelligent assistants that are increasingly being made available on people's phones. What use are people making of those facilities? How are they interacting with their phone? Is voice interaction becoming part of what they do on a daily basis? Some of that, is looking to the future, but a lot of it is also part of people's daily practice. So I think our challenge is to think about how these different ways of using mobiles might complement what people do, say, in an online course of any kind. This list tries to set out some of the key learning benefits of using mobiles, particularly in an out-of-class or blended settings. So I don't know how you think about mobile learning, but maybe your experience has been in class, so handing out tablets to learners or getting them to use their phones. This emphasizes the out-of-class experience. So typically people using their own device, their own technologies. And the kinds of things that mobile learning will enable them potentially to do will be to maintain that connection between different settings and continuity of learning. applying it to their daily life, maybe connecting the learning with their daily activities and habits, the things they do when they travel on a daily basis. Their personal goal setting and self-directed learning could be done through the mobile as a way to complement the less personal experience of a MOOC. There's also the chance to harness spontaneous incidental learning, meaning things that occur in daily life that you didn't plan for. How can you capture what's happened, turn it into a learning experience, a language learning experience? There's also the media creation and sharing aspect of mobiles, of course, to document what's happening, to capture data. Context and location relevant learning, maybe building something around significant places for the learners, making that contextual learning as a complementary kind of learning to what they're doing in the MOOC. We've already mentioned the playful game-based learning, augmented reality, and that more rapid communication, collaboration or peer support that is potentially available through WhatsApp and other applications that people are using. Notifications or prompts for reflection and action is another potential area which can be used, as I say, to complement what people are doing in the MOOCs. And immediate intelligent assistance. So, the future of mobile learning will still be, I'm sure, with phones for a long time, but we know that there are all kinds of other devices and all kinds of other technologies that are, including various robot-like assistants that are coming on the scene. So, looking to the future, we need to think broadly about what people are using, what they have access to in the home, the smart devices, perhaps smart toys that the children might be using, wearables, whether it be watches or glasses, or clothes. I think we just need to think more broadly about how we bring their experience of different kinds of technologies into the learning context. So I think that brings me to the end of my talk, and hope it's given you some ideas for the rest of the day, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.